Hi, my name is Matt Sitter. I am CEO of AFN. Great to have you here today. And AFN, the central idea that we think about is that change is where opportunity happens, and the best way to find opportunity in change is a network that is diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. And so what we do with these events is we bring subject matter experts to help you learn about spaces that will help you in guiding your business towards your next step of success. Today, we're going to be talking about fractional HR and how that can be helpful within a business. There's a really wide open space in terms of when and how you use these folks. We've got Kristin Speer, who's managing partner at Westwood and Wilshire. She also founded their
I'm a
fractional HR
co-founder of,
practice, AccelPeople. Yeah. So great to have you on, Chris. I'll hand it over to you to give a little bit of introduction and introduce Monica and Lonnie.
Great. Happy to do so. And good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are. The fractional HR and the fractional executive trend is a really big trend. And I am co-founder of Westwood and Wilshire's group called AccelPeople. We're an executive search firm, of course, but when companies are growing, they have a lot of things that come up from that fast evolution on the people side. So experienced CEOs are turning more and more to the fractional HR person coming on early. So today I thought it would be great to hear from a couple of people who are in that kind of a practice. And these are folks who are on assignment for us. I know the quality of their work. They're exceptional HR leaders who can cover a lot of different issues for a CEO. But I'd like to introduce both Monica Jenkins and Lonnie Brewer, have them tell you a little bit about them and then get into what they do as an actual fractional head of HR. So go ahead, Monica.
I got worried if my sound is still not working. Can you all hear me? Perfect. Yes. Thank you for having me here. I've been doing fractional HR work since about 2018, off and on. And I've been in the HR world for longer than I like to share, but and just happy to be here and be a part of this forum today.
Go ahead, Lonnie.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here. My name is Lonnie Brewer. I'm based out of San Francisco, California. I've been in HR for north of 25 years, started my career in academia, but have spent most of that time as an HR business partner, talent leader, even done M&A work back in my GE days. So now my focus, in addition to doing fractional HR work, I'm an HR consultant, executive coach, and do a lot of fractional HR work, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Okay. So both of you are actively on assignment right now. So I just wanted to clear that up. And Monica's at a biotech company. Lonnie, you're on a variety of tech companies. Yeah. Go ahead.
So great. Thanks for being on. Now, when we're thinking about the type of help that you might be giving to folks or the size of businesses, when do you think it's important for folks to start saying, hey, I need a fractional HR person to come in versus I've got to hire someone? And Monica, if we can go to you first, that would be great.
Yes, I would say almost from the beginning, because having been in a lot of small startups, typically they bring HR in too late, and they have wage and hour issues where, they have misclassified employees, things that can really cause pain to an organization. And, even thinking about how to grow. So the workforce planning of it all, we can be very helpful from the ground up, working with the CEO to think about those things.
So beginning means a lot of things to a lot of different people, right? And so when you're coming up with ideas, things like that, I'm guessing that's not the time to bring in an HR consultant, but
no, but I would say when you're ready to start hiring people to do the work, some of the things I've seen in offer letters, just a lot of things that can be really, distasteful if their, employee, if their company's audited or, having someone come in. So I'm saying as soon as you start ready to build your organization, you should have at least a fractional HR person on site so that you can actually have them help you guide through that process, negotiating salaries, all those things that are not normally kin to executives when they're getting started, if that's not their forte.
Yeah, I completely agree. So the only thing I would add to that is also thinking about the culture that you want to design. So having that that HR partner up front helps you figure out, who do you want to be? What does that culture look like? No matter what you put on paper in terms of what you want your culture to be, your culture ultimately depends on the people that you hire. And so then you have to stop back and ask the question, who am I hiring and why? What is the process I'm using? So when you think about all those aspects of culture, I think that that's a key reason to bring on a fractional HR person early. The other thing, I find that I spend a lot of time with my leaders as a confidant as well. So as they're dealing with investors, as they're dealing with board issues, so as they're unpacking who do we want on our team? Those kind of questions, having that person in me who they can confidentially have these discussions and think through some of these things also has been a benefit from the folks that I've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really interesting comment. Yeah, I think I've seen that in practice a lot. And you both made the comment about hiring well, but I think that we've all experienced that you really don't know everything about somebody when you hire them, right? You make your best call, but then there's invariably things that come up that might be dynamics on the team, or somebody thought something that really wasn't ever there, but they say, well, my understanding was X or whatever. How much do you get pulled into the kind of almost interpersonal or working, dynamics of people? In other words, how much do you get? Does the CEO tend to want to put problems on your desk that really they should be solving? Or, are you coaching them on how to do this? Or what happens with all of those messy issues that come up?
I'd say it's a blend of both, and it depends on the experience of the CEO. Some of them believe that by definition as HR that you would handle all of those things. And I, have to spend a little bit of time explaining to them why they're setting the tone for their organization. I'm not running the organization, so people need to see you in first position and me by your side, and then we work through it.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, as issues come up, my first approach is always to coach them, just try to understand, what the challenge is, and try to coach them into solving their own problems. But there are times where people just simply need reassurance. Are we headed in the right direction? And a lot of what I find myself doing is quarterbacking things, going, okay, this is a great question. Here's my opinion, but you should also consult the lawyer, and let's work together to put this narrative together so you're clear on what question you have and, who is the best person to answer this question. So in terms of the challenging situations, I'm either coaching them through it or quarterbacking them, making sure they have the right resource to solve the problem. And sometimes I'm, a lot of times I'm doing the reassurance, but there's just as many times where I'm going, do you realize that this could be an issue? And here's how that looks. So sometimes I'm, reassuring, and other times I'm doing the opposite, saying that, you have an ugly baby here, and let me tell you how this could.
And there's not enough cute outfits.
Okay.
When you guys are thinking about the best way to enter into an organization, and maybe we can kind of juxtapose this between like, hey, when I come in and these are the things that we've got, it goes great. When these are the things that we're not set up with, It just doesn't seem to work as well. What helps you get set up in the right way so that you can be doing what you need to for the business? And it could be what the leader's doing, it could be organizational structure, any of those things, wide open. Lonnie, let's have you go first on that.
Yeah, I would say access to people, understanding, some history background. I like to learn as much about not only what the company is trying to do, but context behind that. What is the history? Who are the right people I can be talking to? So I guess in a broad sense, just really understanding context is really key and critical. And sometimes, you take for granted that that's there. Sometimes I have to really fight to go, okay, but I really need the background to understand the context. So that's the first thing that comes to mind, context and access to people and vision. What is your North Star? Who do you want to be? Depending on what the answer to that question is, there's a lot of different directions we can take you in. It's kind of that whole idea that, different styles win different races. And we have to find, and understand exactly what you as a CEO are trying to do here.
And I would just piggyback on that to say that, and this happens a lot when you're interviewing for some of these fractional positions. There's a mindset that if you're HR, you can do all things in HR, and that, by just looking in the buildings, maybe 10 minutes in the break room, that you understand all the issues that are going on. And one of the things I learned early on is sometimes what the executives think the issues are, or the issue the precipitating issue that they brought you in for is generally the tip of the iceberg. There's a bunch of other stuff down there that they don't always know, because those things people aren't going to tell you, that they're struggling with their leadership or struggling with, some other things that they don't want you to see. And so you have to be a bit of put your prospector's hat on, your little light, and to be able to kind of, your little tools so you can dig underground and kind of unearth some things before you really know what you're working with. And then you have to negotiate that with the CEO, because maybe the 3 projects they hired you for, there's 10, and we don't have to use me for all 10, but you need to know that those 10 exist.
So if I think about, as a leader, my instinct is like, hey, I got some HR problems that are here. I don't know HR. I never worked in it, but I got the feeling that I've got it. And, I think I need someone in-house to do it versus, someone who is, basically coming in from a fractional basis. How do I make that determination on whether I ought to have someone actually devoted 100% to the organization and an actual employee versus using someone like you guys? And Lonnie, we can go to you first.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is it depends on where you are. I've worked with companies that, are pretty far downstream and they're looking to take something to the next level. I've also worked with companies that, have 2 employees, right? And they're looking to determine how do we grow, and including, how do we bring in people? So I guess that's the first thing that comes to mind is, where are you in that continuum? How quickly are you looking to grow? And that'll help me understand, what are the things that we need to build? And is that something that we need someone who can come in and be there from the beginning? Or is that something I can help you stand up and then bring someone in to maintain it? So I don't know that I have an easy answer to that. It's one of those things that I have to investigate. Monica, what is your view on that?
I agree with you. The only thing I would add to that, and that's really, really super important, is you have to know the skills you need for the top 10 things you want to accomplish, say, in that year for HR, a year or 2 years out, because you could go hire somebody that's dedicated to you. But if your biggest issues are executive comp and comp a compensation to get the stand up the bonus or whatever the programs are, and you hire somebody who doesn't have that background, they're yours. But now you got to go out and get a consultant too. So, some things somebody can learn pretty quickly, but some things are skill. And I guess I alluded to this earlier, is that there's a concept that if you hire an HR person, that they are skilled in every aspect of HR. Now I can do it all because I've been a single solo HR for a lot of years, but I'm not comp. I don't like comp. I don't like benefits. I'm not great at it. And there are 20 other people you could hire that are better than me. So if the first 3 years of you growing your organization, those are your things, I can get you there, but you probably do better off hiring somebody different.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was trying to say. I see more leaders making mishires than I see anything else. So you hire someone who's fairly junior, but they're not capable of doing what you need them to do. And I've also seen the opposite, where you hire someone who's worked at a big tech company and they're a little bit too high level, and they also can't execute the work that you need done. So my question in our due diligence is, where are we today? Where are you trying to go? How quickly do we need to get there? And then we determine what the right skill set is. In a perfect world, you have this kind of complementary thing. You bring in someone who is fairly junior to execute on some of the kind of blocking and tackling. And we do that in conjunction with the fractional, right? So that seems to be the most reliable kind of methodology, as opposed to bringing someone in who's high level, and then now you got to, support that with a lot of execution focused people.
Or try to find the miracle person that sometimes, we need someone that can do the whole spectrum, and we want them really senior and they know how to help at the executive level, but then they also don't have any problem doing all the hands-on work. And it's just too much. The spectrum of what's expected, I think, out of the typical HR person is way beyond reality typically. So, but I know a lot of companies are going to say, well, we only have budget for one, so we want to get that person that's senior enough but not too senior, and they'll do the whole thing. I think that that's too tall an order to really put on somebody, and it's a rare person that would actually want that job also. So,
and an easy.
Can I just play back a couple of things that I heard from you guys, and you can tell me if I'm crazy or not? So, like, flexibility sounds like one. Do you know what you need? Breadth of, hey, what are the things that you actually looking at? If you don't understand what you need as well, that means that you probably shouldn't be hiring someone right away. And that idea of strategic versus tactical. So if you're hiring someone to do both, you're going to have a really hard time around that. Those are the 4 things that I heard, but please feel free to add on to that.
I want to jump in and say one thing. I think that there's a really good place for Monica, Lonnie, whoever, to come in and do the work with the CEO to find out what is it that we really do need to focus on. So I think it's unreasonable to say to a CEO, well, what are your problems? And we'll find the person for that. I don't think they know the problems, or like what Monica and Lonnie have alluded to. Some of the HR quote unquote problems are structural, like in comp and things like that. Others are very nuanced among people, and how the culture is functioning or not functioning. The CEO can't know everything about that. So I think that there's a really good diagnostic time for a fractional VP HR to get in there and spend just, I don't know, a month, something on a fractional basis, and just get to know the organization and help the CEO lay out a plan. Here's on the people side what you need to be doing. Correct me if I'm wrong, team, because that's
no, I think you're right on. And that's true of any function if you think about it. I mean, if you brought in a finance person, right, do you want to bring in a CFO type or do you need someone to do some, finance and accounting, bookkeeping? I mean, there's so many different levels and layers. It's also true of legal, depending where you are in the organization. You bring someone in who can handle the employment issues, but now you need a patent attorney as well, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's true of any function, but that's spot on.
Although I would argue that, at least from what I've seen, the HR is a more nebulous area. In finance, there's a very, tick the boxes kind of thing. You start with your getting your accounting set up and your controller, and then when you get to a certain point, you'll think about a CFO, blah, blah. I think in HR, it's messier than that. It's always changing. Your accounting doesn't change that much, but people, man, they do on a daily basis.
I completely agree. There's definitely a lot more nuance, whereas the finance piece is a little bit more structured by nature.
Chris, I got a question for you. One of the things that we're seeing generally is that more and more functions are being kind of hived off from the business. I would say this is part of what we had in the pandemic. You had everyone on Zoom, things like that, and like people not being in the office. You're like, okay, do I actually need to have this person employed within it? When we think about HR specifically for this, are you seeing bigger companies saying like, hey, we actually don't need to have the full-time person in here? And so the market's expanding for who uses fractional services rather than having someone who's my person.
Well, I would slice it a little bit differently. I would say with the Trinets and the PEOs and all of those that are coming in to handle much of the structural component. So there's a lot of different parts to HR, and that's why it's such a challenging area. The PEOs can get companies set up and functioning pretty well with all the infrastructure that used to be done with a person inside. So that's true. And many of them offer, on-call advice and things like that. The problem is that you still need, what I've seen is that CEOs still say pretty early, they need that touch point. They need the personal touch point that's going to be in touch with the people on a daily basis. It will not work to, phone up somebody in HR to get advice. You actually need someone working with the people. So you've got to have that. And so for a lot of companies, it's what the team here has been saying. You have maybe depending on your company and your phase and all that, you might have an HR manager, or you might have an office manager who does a lot of the HR running that platform and getting people signed up for benefits or all these little things, right? But then the CEO has the other end of the spectrum where they really do need a thought partner, which is it time to bring on a such and such, or should we be restructuring here, or my board thinks blah, 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 how should I handle that, or whatever. And those are questions that your office manager, no offense, is not going to be able to help you think through. So I think that in-house person, the nature of what they do has changed, but the need for one has remained the same. So a lot of our HR placements now are looking for a head of people and culture, or something, whereas in the bad old days, it used to be, okay, we need to hire a benefits person. We need to hire a whatever, very block and tackling. Most of that has been lifted off the back of young companies, but the people part remains. And it just changes every day. It's so fluid that unless you've got somebody embedded with it, you just can't keep up. You can't keep ahead of it. You can't influence people the way you'd like to.
Okay, so the blocking and tackling stuff, that was the easiest thing to hive off and give to someone else to begin with. And now it's like, all right, but we've got all these problems that are changing on a day-to-day basis. But the breadth and depth of what we're looking at can change a lot. And therefore, all right, what do you do against that? Because if you hired someone inside to be able to do it, they're going to be living, breathing what's going on, but they may not have the breadth of experience to be able to handle it all.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking of companies I know where the inside person was really useful in like let's say the CEO wants to influence the culture and bring people together more. So you're planning some events or you're doing something like that. Well, who's going to sort of go out and poll people about, hey, we're going to have this kind of thing. What do you think? And blah, 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 and plan it and put all the little things together and get people involved. So it's a really cool thing. And clean up afterwards, and things like that. It's like you need that person embedded with to be part of the company, to influence the company. I don't think any company employee is going to want to say, oh, I'm supposed to be building a culture, so we're going to go to a culture meeting. I mean, that's going to fall flat. You got to have someone of the fabric that you're working with. But, depending on your size and all these other factors, your fractional person can actually stand in for a lot of that with the executive team. Maybe not the day-to-day, but I could be corrected by Monica and Lonnie. So I don't know.
What I would say with what you're saying, Kristin, is in it, and I just keep seeing water is my visual, because what happens, water seeks to its own level. It's the same thing with people. If you don't have that, the executive admin becomes that person. People seek that. They seek that connection, that somebody that I can, and you don't know it until you get in there. And so sometimes even when I take these assignments, I may have a project I'm supposed to do, but by the time I get in, I kid you not, by day 2, if someone knows an HR person is in the building, my calendar is filled up because they have all these things that they've been holding inside to talk about. So then there goes the project, because now I'm meeting one-on-ones with this one, and that one. And it's not just the junior people. It's sometimes people that sit on the C-suite because they haven't been able to use their voice, because, it's a new startup and I don't want to rock the boat, and I get to do whatever it is I do really well. And, it's funny, but it happens.
Well, I think, the danger there is scope creep, right? For the CEO, they thought they were hiring something. They're like, oh, okay, I guess there is all these things underneath the surface, but now what do I do? Mm-hmm. And so really being able to decipher that is a challenge for them, because of course, it may just fill up the space that's allotted for it, right? But how do we make sure that we can keep focused on the things that are going to help us grow in the right way?
Lonnie, come on, you're holding in a lot. I could see it in your eyes, man.
No, I just agree with everything I've heard. I mean, that's the tricky question is finding the right people early on. And, what I see a lot of companies do is they'll have people doing HR work. And then all of a sudden they're saying, hey, this person is not performing. Well, yeah, because that's really not their sweet spot. So to me, the key is bringing someone in who can look at the breadth and say, look, here is, now that I understand your context and I understand your North Star, here are some places where we definitely need to bring someone in-house and just pull it all together. And that's what I meant earlier when I said quarterbacking it, just really understanding, where you are, where you need to go, what you have that you can use now and what you're going to need later. So yeah, no, I think we're all aligned on that.
So how does a CEO keep control of their budget? I mean, what you said, Matt, is something that if I were a CEO, I'd be totally afraid of. I get a person in here and people matters could expand to fit whatever I want to, put behind it. So how do you keep control on something like that? How have you guys seen it done? I mean, when you work with the CEO, they don't have infinite budget. So how do you prioritize, or how do you figure out how to work within those constraints?
Is that a question for Matt, or?
I don't have the answer. I definitely don't.
Yeah, I guess my short answer to that is you have to prioritize your priorities. And that's one of the things that we have to sit down and talk about. Where are your biggest exposures? How do we determine together, based on what you're trying to do, how to prioritize those things. So, and I was going to add something to that, but I'm kind of losing my thought there. But yeah, I mean, that's the short answer is, it's just really try to understand where you're going.
So I have a question, and I'm not trying to lead the witness here, but I would love to know where you have seen you've been able to save companies money. I'm a CEO. I'm looking for the ROI. If I'm going to have someone in here like this, how do I know that it's, that there's a return on that? How do you see that?
Monica, did you want to take that, or I'm happy
I can. Obviously, this most recent assignment, it's been here short term, so I can't speak to it. But in a past situation, it was in two places, because what ends up happening when people stand up companies, they go out and they hire some kind of a PEO. And better nowadays, there's so much better ones now, but back in the day, there were some really bad ones out there, and they were paying through the nose for really bad employee benefits. And they go out because they got to hire people, and they book all of these recruitment firms that charge them, 35% to hire people. And and this one company, they were doing it for every job. So they were spending millions on search fees to build their company. And so those were a couple of different places where I was able to help, right away save money pretty quickly, where you could see it by not using all those recruiters and doing some of that work myself. The other side of it is in being able to point out some big level executive conflicts that were going to cost a lot of money to pay people to leave the organization. When if you get in front of it, you can, in some ways, if you get in front of a thing and you have somebody who is able to sort of lay it out in a way that makes sense to a person, you don't have to spend, 8 months, a year severance salary to walk somebody out the door. If you can address those kinds of issues up front. So there's some really easy ones I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, I always preach, be slow to hire and quick to fire. It's a bumper sticker, but it makes sense. So making sure that you help set up the right framework for where they're trying to get to, so that they are attracting the people that they think they're attracting. So that's one thing. And I would also say, stuff like setting up the right comp structure, right? So that you're incentivizing the thing that you think you're incentivizing. It's not uncommon to see a comp structure that incents the wrong behavior. So now you're getting, people focused on the wrong stuff. So just making sure that we build that the right way. Performance issues as well. How do you handle performance issues so that if it does get to a point where you have to make a call about whether to keep that person or not, you've done things the right way so that you're on solid legal ground, right? I've seen companies mess that up. And so now we're in a situation where, you're going to this is going to drag out another 6 months. You can't pull the trigger now. But if we had talked upstream about that, then you would be really well positioned with all the documentation you need, not risking those legal exposures. And then also I see companies trying to figure out, do I bring someone on full time? Do I bring someone on as a contractor? So what are the different implications of both? What happens when I have a contractor who's not performing? So really simple questions like that. I've seen companies mess that up where they're treating contractors like employees and legal exposure issues there. And then begs the fundamental question, are you hiring the right way? Are you over leveraged with contractors? So things like that, that's low hanging fruit that I can help you solve that right away. And I talked about, being that confidant that helps leaders feel reassured. So that manifests with, that C-suite that they're building. Is this the right person, right time, right job? and just helping them quickly get to decisions, and not just around hires, but other things that leaders might be struggling, am I headed in the right direction? I think it saves money when leaders can make a good decision, make it quickly and move forward, as opposed to, feeling like, they're protracting this decision because they're not sure that they're in the right direction. So just having us there as a partner to reassure them, no, this is exactly, the right balance here, from my view. So those are some things that I think translate pretty quickly into ROI that leaders feel.
I just want to jump in with one other thing that I just reminded myself of. There's a question that I asked my CEO because I work with a lot of startups and small companies that are growing, that I have to ask at every stage of our company's development. And it's a tough question, is, do you have the right people sitting at the table right now? And I ask that on a regular basis, because sometimes you join the company with Fred, you brought Fred because Fred worked with you, but Fred can't scale when you're a commercialized company. Fred doesn't have the network. He doesn't have the understanding. Fred wants to tinker. Ted doesn't want to be, out in public or whatever the thing is. But it's an important question. It's tough because there's some investment in these people that have brought them thus far. But it's a really critical question to ask as you're growing it. And that's a money saver in a number of ways as the company grows.
So in just a second, we're going to open it up for questions. But one of the things that Lonnie said, I just want to be able to tap on it real quick, is the idea of the slow to hire, quick to fire. I have never heard of anyone being good at the quick to fire thing. And so from a totally pragmatic perspective, any advice for folks on like how they should be thinking about like, how do I actually make sure that I am helping to move people out of the building for their own sake and ours as quickly as possible?
Yeah, no. So I think it starts with hiring the right person for the job, right? So right skills, right time, right compensation. So all those things have to be aligned. And then you also have to understand, what are the performance expectations? Have you built the right goals? Have those been communicated? Is the right incentive compensation in structure? So when all those things are done well and the person's still not performing, then we have to have a conversation. So making sure you have the right structure around how do you have that conversation? How do you give them time to improve? So just having all those things, all those checkpoints, that framework in place, now it becomes an easy decision. I've always said that, I've been in hundreds of termination conversations, right? Literally hundreds, if not thousands. But I always say I've never fired anyone. I've only communicated to them that it's official. They fired themselves, right? And that's how it should be. My career started at GE, and at GE, we had these conversations regularly where people weren't performing. And I can't think of a single time I was there that somebody was surprised, because all of that structure was in place. They knew where they stood against their goals, right? So that's how you do it, by having all those things in place, so that when you finally have to have that conversation, people understand, yes, I did not meet the expectations. Yes, I understood that this is where that this day would come. So that's how I would respond to that. Is that helpful?
It's great. Defining expectations and making sure that everyone knows where accountability sits. That's what I took away from that. Monica, do you have anything to add to that?
I was just going to say, and I'm not going to put this on executives or managers. I'm going to put this on HR too, because you have to have the courage as an HR person to have those tough conversations with those employees before it gets to the termination. So I don't wait till the manager says I'm ready to fire. If I know they're having a problem with, Mary, I'm sitting down having one-on-one with Mary going, how do you see this? Because here's what I'm hearing. What do you think about that? You've gotten this feedback. Where are you going to go? So I want to make sure that I am supporting that employee through a difficult time, but being very clear about where it could go. And how do you prepare for that so that I don't knock on your door one day and schedule a meeting, at 4:00 on a Friday or whatever that is. I never do that, but I'm just saying that I think we own that too, and that's hopefully what an executive is buying in their HR person, that that courage to have tough conversations with people.
I think that's the
What's
main thing you want to buy.
Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I think that's the main thing they're buying, because they don't want to wade into that. And having, at the very least, a guide. Second best is a Sherpa, and third best is, someone that can really get out ahead on the trail. Those are the things that I have seen CEOs they dread that stuff. That just keeps them up at night. It tears their guts up. How are they going to handle something?
Sure. Yeah. Okay, excellent. So very good stuff. I know we never totally crack the nut on all the problems that we think about. We only get an hour to hang out together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to questions for the folks that are on right now. And so to close off the recording here, thank you very much for being on. I'm assuming, Chris, that people can reach out to you when they're consuming the recording if they want to talk to you about any of this stuff.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, cool. All right.